Hello and welcome to SweetSpotDFS. This is a stat fit video for the 2021 Shriners Hospitals for Children Open. What I cover in these videos, in these stat fit videos, are basically comparisons between the results and recent form, as well as the results and the swing stats, which cover all the strokes gained metrics. So I will cover the last 6 years of recent form. That dates back to 2014. We'll look at all the different types, and what recent form is to me are the last 7 weeks leading into a tournament. I think that's a pretty good sweet spot when it comes to recent form. In tomorrow's video, which will be the DFS strategy video, I usually look at last year and last week. So we really hone down on the golfers we think are going to do well based off of very recent form for both course history and recent form. And then the stats, usually it goes back to however long I've captured the data for. And currently for this tournament, I only have it for 2020. So we'll look at 2020's results and just look at each stat category and see which ones, were prolific in a way, see which ones we want to target for this tournament. And then I'll wrap everything up with my favorite stat fit plays for this tournament. You can find timestamps in the description. Also, I have chapter mode active, so you can look here at the bottom. You'll see little segments if you hover over the screen, and just a nicer way of getting to a spot that you find important or interesting. All right, let's go ahead, dig into the spreadsheet. I have right away up the 2020 recent form. So this would be last year's tournament. And obviously Kevin Na won. When I go through this, all I want you guys to do is pay attention to this column. This is the recent form average. You can see all of the finishes that led into this tournament to make up this number. And all I want you to do is keep track of really how many different colors you see. They are color coded based off of their bucket, their finishing range. So 20 or 1 to 20 is light green, 20 to 40 is yellow, orange is 40 to 60, and it goes by every 20. So that way, when you look at these colors, if you see red, not a good sign. If you see green, it's a good sign. As you can see, we see a bunch of different colors up here. And that's primarily why I cover this video or go into this video. It's so you don't get stuck looking at one stat or another. If you are a recent form versus course history guy, that's totally fine. Here's reasons why you shouldn't be all in on one or the other. That's primarily why I do this video. As you can see, for 2020, recent form, it varied. If I were to go ahead and sort this from top to bottom, this way you can see, okay, of the top recent form guys, which ones did well? Well, your very top recent form guy was Tony Finau, but his last starts were at the Tour Championship in BMW, which were 5 weeks prior to this tournament. If that's not close enough for you guys for recent form, I understand, but as you can see, he finished 9th, and in my way of capturing stats, he did well, and he had one of the best recent forms, or one of the best averages coming into this. So $9,800, pretty good. But then you have Brian Harman, which probably at 7,800 and 18th place finish, not terrible. But of course, you can see the rest of them. You can see some of the price tags over here. Just keep that in mind. Your top price guys coming into form don't always mean they're going to do well. I'm not going to talk about everybody, but I'm going to scroll down and you can just keep track of all the golfers within this range or within these ranges and determine for yourself, are they, is it something to hold on to think about? But basically, Kevin Na is here and he would have the 57th best recent form heading into this tournament. So that's one way to look at this. If I keep scrolling down, you keep seeing greens here. This is the result of the tournament. You can see it doesn't really matter what the recent form is. You want to be picking golfers of all different types of recent forms. And then obviously when we get into stats, that's going to be another, attribute that you want to include. So this was your 2020 review of recent form. Let me go ahead and go into 2019. And I'm going to continue. I'm just going to sort by this and we'll go through really quickly here. Just if you want, pause the video, take a screenshot, just look at all the different recent forms that are up here as well. Not as terrible as 2020. So definitely having better recent form here looked like it mattered. And of course, you can also see all the different tournaments leading into it. So again, our top recent form guy didn't play since the Tour Championship, finished 15th, and he was 10-3. So Tony Finau last year was 9,800, and Webb Simpson the year before was 10-3. Both of them had the best recent form. Both of them finished top 20. So I don't know what you want to make of that, but of course, it's there for you to digest. As I continue going down here, the DNS just means did not show. I should have deleted him out of this, but I'm not going to worry about it. But again, you see golfers from each range. This time, not so much in this light red. I take that back. Brandon Harkins, 79.5. You can see a missed cut at the Sanderson Farms Championship when it was an alternate event, and then a 74th at the Safeway Open. He's really the only guy, though, down here with terrible recent form coming into this that did well. So keep that in mind. I mean, that was 2019. Let's go ahead and look at 2018. Again, screenshot it, pause it, look at the numbers here. This is reminiscent of 2020. Your top recent form guy once again finishes inside the top 20, so that little light green color here. And recent form for the most part, I mean, we have 7 golfers. 7 golfers finished inside the top 20 that had 20 or better recent form. So you could probably make a lineup out of these golfers. Definitely something to keep in mind. And then right here are yellows, pretty good. So I'm not going to do a complete analysis of it, but you can see for yourself, again, you really don't want to fade one range or another. You could make the argument that you would want more golfers inside this recent form average because obviously you can make a lineup and it's just easier to go that way. But of course, when we look at the other years, that didn't really match up. So that was your 2018. Again, I'll leave you time to pause it if you want. If we go and look at this, now our top guy, I mean, does anyone really know who Greg Owen is? Probably not. Second at the Safeway, got him an invite here. That's all that Greg Owen kind of amounted to. But you can see here, your top recent form guys, yeah, there are some that finished inside the top 20. But for the most part, your top guys, if we were looking at name recognition, your top guys did well. Your lower named guys did not. So maybe keep that in consideration. But again, I'm going to scroll down this kind of slow. If it's too fast, my apologies. You can let me know in the comments. But again, every range, basically, I mean, even our winner here, 63.5, that was a 42nd place at the Sanderson Farms and a missed cut at the Safeway Open. He finished first for this tournament. So it kind of goes to show that recent form isn't entirely a means for success at this tournament. Go ahead and get into 2016. Again, take note, a lot of different colors, meaning a lot of different ranges represent, the top 20. I don't necessarily need to talk about a lot of these golfers. You guys can see on the screen. It's just, again, all the different ranges represent inside the top 20. So don't get stuck playing, golfers of the best recent form, versus golfers of the best course history. You can see that for the most part, it's not a bad idea to grab maybe your top guys with good recent form. I don't even know if we really thought Brooks Koepka was that good in 2015. And of course, this would have been 2014. This is the season of 2015, but this tournament was played at the end of 2014. I really don't know any other golfers that we would have considered good here, but a lot of this recent form was from the week prior, so we'll look into that tomorrow. But again, I'm going down here. We had 3 weeks off between the Tour Championship and the beginning of the season. So that's why recent form isn't really populated other than the week prior. So that's obviously something to consider as well. But you can see, even with this, shortish recent form capture, you can see all the ranges are once again represented. So definitely, again, do not get married to the fact that we want good recent form. I think it's a good place to start, but for the most part, don't get married to that idea. You can see every year it differs a little bit, but it's very much the same. Every range once again is represented. So just more proof to add to your confidence of maybe grabbing someone who doesn't have good recent form, but maybe good course history. I don't know if that really bodes true for every year. I guess that was another thing if you want to go back and look as I was scrolling through this, looking at recent form and then course history. So, Chad Campbell, 60.5 course history, 85 coming into this. It just shows anyone can do well here. Okay, so that was kind of the comparison between results and recent form. Let's go ahead and dig into the stats. So in 2020, what I ended up grabbing, and I'm going to just hide this just to save myself the hassle. I grabbed stats from the beginning of the year to current day. This was last year. So really, I only had, if we look at 2020, Greenbrier, Sanderson Farms, and Safeway Open. Those are the only stats that are represented in these numbers. This doesn't go back to the year before. This is all for the recent year, or of that recent year. So the 3 events. What I did last week for Sanderson Farms and what I also did this week was I actually grabbed stats from 2020. The entire season of 2020. We're in the 2021 season. I know it's 2020, the year 2020, but I grabbed, the whole season-long stats and applied them to the 2021 DK page. But then I also grabbed, and I just want to show you guys what that looks like. So you see, I have a bunch of these columns up here. The light blue is 2020 season. Dark blue is the 2021 season. So when we look at the top guy, this is Bryson, 4.4 shots or strokes gained, tee to green. That was all from the US Open. That was his only tournament he played. And we'll dig into this a little bit later, but I just want you guys to know, when we look at the 2020 DK page, what I'm covering with swing stats is just the 3 events that were prior to this tournament. So I don't want to confuse you guys, and I don't even know if they're the greatest stats to look at. We'll breeze through it and try to get it done a little quicker than usual. I'm going to hide some of this irrelevant information. Let me put a filter on here as well. I think the first thing I want you guys to pay attention to, the top 20 stats column over here. Now what this is, I ended up tallying all of the golfers who were top 20 in these stats up here, and then just summing them up over in this column. And that's where that number comes from. But the number obviously comes from the stats that are right here. So if I go ahead, sort tee to green, and then come over here and show you, you're going to see tee to green, the top 20 golfers. They all have a tally mark next to them. I know they're all ones, so you can just think of them as tally marks. So it's just a way to prove to you guys that this number here is reflective of those top 20 stats. Let me go ahead and actually freeze this. That way we can talk about this pretty freely. So yeah, I want to go by result. That's what this column is. So obviously Kevin Na won this tournament last year. You can see he only had 1 stat that he was top 20 in. And you guys guess what that was? If you guessed putting, you're correct. Kevin Na is a pretty decent putter. So is that a stat that you want to stick to? Now, certain people out there will look at the winner stats and say, that's exactly what we need at this tournament. Of course, you're also going to hear people say you can never trust putting stats coming into this tournament. And I'm not even saying that to try to dissuade you from using putting stats or persuade you in using putting stats. It's just a stat to me that, I mean, Kevin Na obviously put everything else together, and he was really hot with this putter, but he's also a good putter. Never listen to someone say, well, we can never trust putting stats because this is never going to happen again. That's not true. It could happen, but don't make a lineup full of good putters. You know, add good putters into your lineup. And I'm not even saying how many you should add, but obviously just don't fade it completely. Like, that'd be foolish, right? So when we look at the stats here, again, this was from the tournaments leading into this, the very few tournaments leading into this. These numbers are all over the place. And I guess when we compare it to 2021, you can see the top guys. You know, Webb in 2020 had 11 top 20. Like, he was top 20 in 11 stats in this field. But if we looked at the events leading into this tournament, for these guys, it's just the US Open. And that's why they only have so many stats that they're at the top of. So at least when we go and review that part of it, it's going to be pretty much the same. But anyways, let's go ahead and get into this. That was a little too much of an explanation. I'm not going to talk about course history or recent form. We kind of already talked about that. And we're not going to talk about last week or last year. Grass stats, I really should have included this in yesterday's video. I will try to include it in tomorrow's video. So, you know, right now, I have the overall Bermuda stats up, or bent grass stats, sorry, and you can see how many top 20 finishes there were. You know, it's not a bad stat to go by, but it doesn't mean every golfer that has good bent grass stats are going to do well. Obviously, you can see Brooks Koepka, he didn't do well. Being the highest priced guy, one of the best overall bent grass stats, he obviously didn't live up to his price tag or even the name recognition. And then obviously 2019 bent, that actually is pretty good. Look at how many golfers do show up here. And again, the missed cuts as well. You got to keep that in mind. So anyways, let's go ahead and talk about the swing stats. If we look at tee to green, strokes gained, I guess I can just go through this pretty quickly. Just keep track of column Z. This is the result of the tournament. So you can see tee to green in comparison to the result. We had 4 golfers who were in the top 20 for tee to green. Finish inside the top 20 for this tournament. And that's what it's going to look like every time I sort through these columns. So off the tee, we only have 3 golfers inside the top 20 who were top 20 for that stat. Approach, 1, 2, 3. Again, just 3. Around the green. Okay, we have a few more, but you know, around the green isn't a stat you would consider at this tournament. Here are your putting stats leading into this tournament. And actually, this is a good point. Since these stats are based off of the last 3 tournaments, it might be worthwhile to grab your hot putters from the last couple weeks. So I guess when we look at 2021, we can grab onto some of these putting stats. Now, there are a ton of missed cuts, but you also have to put name recognition to that. Rod Pampling, I think, is old enough now to be on the senior tour, or I should say the Champions Tour. So he wouldn't be a name, although he's top in putting, he wouldn't be a name we would think would be in contention. You know, $6,000, not very good. Charles Howell III, 8,500. We probably would have expected him to do well at this tournament, but you know, it is also it's CH3. So, you know, I think last year Sam Burns was a rookie or one of the younger golfers, 7K. Streelman at 74. You know, bad stats leading into this tournament except for putting. I'm not going to give a whole breakdown of all these players, but just want you to look at the name recognition, you know, look at the putting, and then, you know, perhaps, I don't know, just take it in for consideration. Looking at green and reg, this should be a percentage sign. There we go. So green and reg for the last 3 weeks heading into this tournament, you know, your top guy finished top 20. but a lot of missed cuts. So maybe not a stat to really go by. How about proximity? Yeah, maybe not a stat to go by either. And in all reality, I realized this last week when I had these, indicating feet and inches. For whatever reason, Google doesn't look at this as a distance measurement. So, and I should say Google Sheets. These guys are better than these ones here. But when I sort by this, I actually have it updated in the top 20 stats. So you don't have to worry. When you look at this, you can obviously see Brian Gay doesn't show up. He doesn't have any of the top 20 stats, although it looks like he does here. So I guess I can scroll down a little bit. Yeah. See, 31.8 is closer than 31.10. Either way, proximity, not a stat to bother with. Birdie or better. For whatever reason, this one wasn't that good either. Again, this is heading into this tournament. So all in all, I would say what I like to do is kind of do an average of all these numbers. And I'm going to use, I know you guys can't see it. I'm sure I'm going to mess up my camera somehow. But there's a function down in the bottom right corner where I can see sum, average, min. If you haven't seen Google Sheets before, don't know how else to, here, hold on. I got an idea. So if I were to do this, you can see it shows right here. There, that wasn't too difficult. I'm just going to read you the numbers as I go through this, and it's going to be the average. So tee to green, it's 0.383. And the reason I'm going to give you the averages, I think this is a better indication of telling you what stat matters. So the higher the number and not negative, the better that stat is to kind of lean on or, anchor your lineups with, essentially. So again, tee to green, I'll go through this quickly so it's easier to keep in track. It's 0.383. Off the tee, 0.129. Approach, 0.125. Around the green, 0.129. Putting, 0.136. Green and reg would be 69.97. Proximity is not going to give me anything. And then birdie or better, 21.62%. So when we just think of the strokes gained, tee to green was at least double more important than any of the other stats. So I would definitely consider tee to green, but also don't be afraid of rostering someone who has terrible tee to green, like Pat Perez. Came into this tournament with top 20 green and reg percentage. None of his stats looked good. But he is a Nevada native. He is a Las Vegas native, and this tournament is being played in Las Vegas. So there are always other things to look at than just strokes gained. And this is a perfect example of what that is. So that was your 2020 review with stats. Let's go ahead and look at the 2021 stats. First and foremost, I want you to pay attention to, actually, you know what? One last thing. Let's go ahead, sort this by top to bottom. So here are your top to bottom, top 20 stats from last year. A lot of golfers, that had good stats finished inside the top 20. So I don't think it's, I think it's worthwhile to grab golfers that are, that have a lot of top 20 stats in the field and anchor your lineups with those. I mean, look at name recognition. I would say also look at your bucket system, which I'll get into tomorrow, and just kind of determine, if it's good, if it works out, or if it matches up with what you believe. Yeah, let's go ahead, look at 2021. Let me go ahead and put a filter on that. And this would be a comparison to last year's stats. So when I look at this column here in the top, the 2021, and just for proof, again, I did the tally for that, and I did the tally for this. So there's a lot of data, a lot of hidden stats right there. So here you guys are. Your guys top to bottom. And if my memory serves me correct, in 2020 we had 8 golfers? Yeah. Terrible memory. 3, 4, 8 golfers. So maybe not so bad. 8 golfers who finished in the top 20 that had top 20 stats in this field, that had the most top 20 stats. So we could find 8 golfers in this little mix of guys here. I'll leave it up to you as to who you think is good just by looking at this. I'll get into it a little bit later. I'll give you my best picks later. But then if we compare that to the 2020 season and the top 20 stats for golfers in this field, the names change. You can obviously see the price tags also kind of reflect how good these guys are. Webb Simpson far and away has the best stats for the 2020 season heading into this tournament. And honestly, I don't think you would have an issue. I wouldn't have an issue with you anchoring this guy or having him as an anchor spot in your lineup. But it's really difficult too, because there's a lot of good golfers in this field. I think it's one of the stronger fields that the Shriners Hospitals or the Shriners Open has had. So it's going to be difficult to anchor somebody. But if there was somebody, Webb wouldn't be a bad guy. Neither would Hideki, honestly. I have reservations for Tony. His game is polished, but I don't know. It just seems like his best has already been out there. And I think a lot of people are getting fooled that he's going to have a breakout one of these times. I think he's capped in a way. But anyways, I'm not going to sit here and talk about all these golfers that you see here, but obviously when you make the comparison, you're going to see some of the guys like Matthew Wolff shows up, Hideki once again. I think Louis does, obviously Webb. There's a lot of guys that stick. Anything that's like over 4 in the top 20 in this column here, you're going to see, they show up both. So let's go ahead. I'm going to hide this column. And then we're going to freeze it right here. And that way we can talk about the rest of the guys over here. Again, I'm not going to talk about course history, recent form, all that stuff. We talked about scoring average in the course fit video. So if you haven't seen it, I would suggest you to. And we're not going to talk about grass. Although I guess since I did it in the last section with the 2020, I can show you top guys. We did this in the course fit video though. But this way you can kind of jump back and forth and look at all that information. So we are going to be here and we're going to first talk about basically the comparison from last year to this year. So we're going to focus on these dark blue columns. We don't want to go that way, but if you wanted to see the worst golfer here, that'd be Kevin Stadler. Don't play him. Yeah, I don't know. I think this shows up this way because there are hidden values in there somehow. There you go. Okay, so Bryson is our top guy, tee to green. Again, we didn't see a lot. I think we saw 4 golfers in 2020 that had the best tee to green heading into this tournament, finish inside the top 20. I bet you could probably make a case that we'll see the same thing. So you see a lot of name recognition up here. I guarantee you 1 or 2 of the top guys will not be in the top 20 leaderboard. So it's for you guys to decide. And again, I will provide who I like at the end of the video. But we can go through off the tee as well. A lot of this is just for you guys to see. So I'm not going to talk about any. I would suggest, pausing the video, making some notes of the guys that maybe you're on or that you questioned that now you like, that kind of thing. Again, you have to mix the course fit in with this. And anyone who hits a draw like Bryson or Matthew Wolff are golfers that I'm going to like. So, they are at the top of tee to green. I think one of these 2 guys could win this tournament easily. Not only does the course fit, obviously fit, but then obviously tee to green is pretty good. My only argument against that would be the top tee to green guy last year, didn't win this tournament. So If Bryson's not winning the tournament, you wouldn't want to play, any shares of him because he's too expensive. Again, looked at approach or off the tee. Here's approach. Here are your top guys here. Around the green, looking at this, it's interesting to see Bryson DeChambeau with his, his too long of wedges to do good in golf. I strongly don't believe in that, but seeing Bryson with around the green, again, that was just at the US Open, so he won, meaning a lot of his stats were going to be good regardless, but at the US Open, being the top guy around the green, that's something to be said. His around the green game is not terrible. And then your putters. Remember last year we had 6 guys inside the top 20 for the top 20 of this stat. You could probably grab 6 guys here. Maybe not so much the top guy, although Peter Malnati wouldn't be a terrible fit, but like Webb, your top guy here, Webb wouldn't be terrible. If we were trying to find someone that was similar to Kevin Na, I guess if we do putting, looking here, I said 6, there were only 5, so my apologies. Kevin Na, down here, he was the 13th best golfer for putting coming into this tournament. He was $7,700, so maybe we can find something like that here. $7,700. JT Poston was the 14th best golfer in putting. I shouldn't say was, he is. But if I'm going to really make kind of a comparison, I would much rather think of like Kevin Chappell. I'm trying to find a Nevada native here or a Las Vegas native somewhere in here because that's what Kevin Na was. But not seeing it. Maybe it's Cameron Smith. Maybe that's a guy we should peg just because his stats look very reminiscent of, we're looking at all of the 2021 stats. Very reminiscent of Kevin Na. More so than JT Poston. JT Poston's kind of the same way. So I think maybe it's Poston, maybe it's Smith. Maybe that's the next Kevin Na. And I'm not saying that these guys will win, but I think they have a good chance to finish inside the top 20. That's really up to you. I think it's fun kind of looking at it that way. Green and red, we're going to see some high numbers here. Now, all this tells me are golfers who are striking the ball good right now. I think you really could pick any of these golfers, and I think they're going to do well. In a funny way, because the bucket system tells me this, I think Patrick Rodgers is a good fit. He's been a favorite of a lot of guys last week and the week before, but Patrick Rodgers as a 2-3, again, we'll talk about this tomorrow, but if I look at the top leaderboard, Pat Perez, 6,300. Patrick Rodgers, 6,800. That's not terrible. And neither is like Camilo Villegas, who I think Chad Eckert is on from the Fantasy Golf Pod. Not a bad play either. But, take it with what you will. Now, proximity, obviously you can see I no longer have the feet and inches because of what I discovered. This is truly from top to bottom, best proximity. But of course, proximity didn't matter last year. It rarely ever does in a tournament. If anything, I would say this. Pick 1 or 2 golfers from here and fade the rest. Or mix and match some of these guys. You can see they're all under $7,900. Doc Redman at 79, Ches Reavie 73. Let's just put it this way. The majority of them are under 7K. Kind of tells you something. And then birdie or better. This also was a stat that didn't really matter in 2020. I don't know if it so much matters here. These are all golfers that are somewhat hot, but your birdie or better streak is also including golfers like, say, Webb Simpson, who shows up as 9.72, as well as Patrick Cantlay at 9.72. Well, guess what? They just played the US Open. There weren't a lot of birdies to be had. So that birdie or better conversion percentage isn't going to be that great when we look at 2021. That's obviously something to consider in this tournament. You can see how that shapes up in comparison. So when we do something like that, when we look at something, obviously Webb had the best birdie or better from last year, and then Bryson was second. And you can see some of these other guys that probably wouldn't show up, like Cantlay, Morikawa, Sungjae to some extent, Hideki, Danny Lee, believe it or not, did play in the U.S. Open and did some funny stuff, as did Ricky Fowler. But then when you compare it to their stats here, obviously this is top to bottom, birdie or better. Ricky is up there. So I don't think Ricky's a terrible play. Maverick McNeely's birdie percentage is very high because he had a very strong putting week last week. Do not get that confused with success for this week. I mean, I'm not saying he can't do well, but definitely something you don't want to consider. So anyways, that was the 2020. I know I kind of talked a little bit about the 2021, but let's go ahead and get into the 2021 stats. Those were the 2021 stats. These are the 2020 stats. So this is all season from last year. Gives us a little bit of an all-around picture. And now all I would say is compare the numbers you see here to current season, like current season form. I'm not going to say seeing these two numbers here are disparaging one way or another. So if we see a high number here and a low number here, it could mean that at this present time, they're hot. But having this low number here, you have to consider the U.S. Open, was a couple weeks ago. And that's what this number is baked in with. But either way, for 2020, these were your most solid tee to green golfers. And I think we do want to find, golfers here that are good tee to green, including like Bryson DeChambeau and Harris English. Like Harris English, this is at the U.S. Open. He's not Bryson. He doesn't hit the ball super far, but tee to green, he did well. I guess when we look at off the tee stats also, that's something to think about as well. As you can see, either way, I'll let you guys be kind of the deciders of what stat looks good to you guys and what stat does not. You can see obviously Sergio has been off the charts with I wouldn't say off the charts, tee to green, off the tee. He's just been Sergio, right? This putting stat here includes his win last week, which obviously he had decent putting strokes or putting strokes gained putting, but in comparison to what he typically is, that's a good way to think about it too. Either way, here are some things that stand out. And not really. I'm not really going to talk about a lot of this. For golfers who did play at the US Open, their numbers are going to be skewed. So very difficult to look at this, with an objective eye. I could say though, in a way, if the stats are lower and they were higher at the US Open, that's actually something, that's more of a positive. So I'm kind of conflicting here. I'm going back and forth a little bit, but I'm also talking it out while I'm talking to you guys and kind of thinking about, how important it was. Like Tony Finau having good approach stats, that bodes well. Obviously hasn't been putting. He didn't putt that well at the US Open, but hey, if he's hitting the ball as well as the stats are showing here, it might be worth the play. He's typically good approach, and he's one of the tops, coming into the season or within the season. Not a terrible play. We can go ahead and look at around the green. To me, nothing really stands out that I want to talk about with around the green. I don't really so much think. What I'll say is this. Around the green is it should be a more consistent stat for golfers who are good around the green. If it fluctuates like this, in a way, it kind of tells me, he may have gotten lucky a few times, or for one tournament he was doing good. I'm not saying, with the top 20 stats here, I will say this looks good. Obviously, that looks good. As does this with Webb. So I guess when it comes to golfers who actually have good around the green stats, maybe it's worth the play. I don't know. This is the first time I've actually looked at a full season of stats compared to like more of a recent form of stats. And in all reality, that's where I want to get to with these videos, is kind of doing a deep dive with all of that in time. And of course, I will also make this better, explaining it to you guys and presenting it to you guys. With putting stats, again, I kind of would stay the same way. You can see who's hot versus who's not. You know, maybe Maverick McNeely, you don't go all in on. Maybe you're more excited to see Bryson living up, or, you know, doing a little bit better. If he's been hot recently and he's known to be a good putter, I mean, he is the 7th best putting or best putter in this field from last year's stats, and then looks like he's probably one of the best for this season. You know, obviously this is just including the US Open, but you know, seeing someone like Wyndham Clark have such a bad putting, does he come back to average? You know, does it average out? And if so, we got to look at his stats for this year, and if they show up to be pretty good, then this can't be too concerning. I mean, it can be, but we think he's going to come back to the means, right? But either way, I'll let you look at that. I'm not going to stay on that too long. Green and reg, again, you can do your comparisons here. I just wouldn't get too excited or too dissuaded, or whatever you want to call it, when you look at these numbers in comparison. Obviously, you have your best green and red golfers, and then how well they've been doing within this last year. To me, that's more noise than anything. And same with proximity. I mean, I would actually rather look at proximity a little bit differently. If a number is lower than the number you see here, these are your top proximity guys. Maybe they're playing a little hotter than usual. And in all honesty, I should probably do it the opposite way around. So golfers who haven't really been hitting it close from last year, maybe their game is kind of turning around and they're playing better. And that's the way I should have been looking at this that way the entire time. But I wanted to show you the differences from last year and this year, so my apologies. And this is a lot longer than I anticipated. Well, not so much that I anticipated, a lot longer than I wanted it to be. And then birdie or better. I'm not going to really talk much about birdie or better. A lot of this will be interesting to look at in the review video. As for you guys looking at stat fits, I would say this. We already went through the 2020 stats and saw that not one stat dominated another. Tee to green, maybe a little double than what we saw with the other stats, but also showing you that don't be afraid of using the putting stat as an indicator or as a stat to find certain golfers that you like. Obviously, it's going to take a little bit of an all-around approach. I would say this, watch my DFS strategy video tomorrow where I'll include the bucket system. Bucket system is a really good way to narrow down your player pool to determine which golfers in these stats you want to play. Obviously, you've seen I have this color-coded over here. If you're new to that and don't understand it, again, watch the video tomorrow. It will explain what that is. Just like in the recent form part of this video, I said these are all colors of the stoplight. Red is no good. Green is good. And it's not to say stay away at all costs if it's red, but it's play with caution. So basically that wraps up all of the detailed information of the stat fit video. So I'm going to give you my favorite stat fits. What I will do though is I'm going to go with finding, certain golfers that are tops heading into this tournament. I do want to find my tee to green guys. So I'm not going to stick like strictly to tee to green. Here's what I'll say. I'm going to either play Bryson or Matthew Wolff for, you know, my top anchor guy. And I might put a couple of these guys together. But when it comes to stat fit, you know, I'm looking at tee to green. How about this? This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab my favorite tee to green golfers. I'm going to grab a couple of them. So we're going to go with Bryson. I'm going to go with Harris English. And believe it or not, I'm going to go Ricky Fowler. Those are my 3 tee to green guys that I'm going to play. Off the tee, how did I do that? I did it this way. Okay, so we'll go this way. So again, there's Bryson off the tee. I'll give you a value play. I think Sam Burns is a good play. And it's hard to say no to Sung Jae. So we'll go that way. We'll go that route with Sung Jae. And then approach, there's Bryson once again. There's Matt Wolff. Really hard to not play any of those guys. And then obviously we have Paul Casey down here, which we've seen show up in every single one of these stats once again. And Hideki. So I'm actually going to conclude right there. And I'm going to tell you, you can't go wrong with Hideki. You can't go wrong with Bryson. You can't go wrong with Webb, Matthew Wolff, Paul Casey, in some parts Ricky Fowler, or Louis. I'd be careful. Louis is known to withdraw, but really these guys here at the top of your salary leaderboard are going to be the best stat fit plays because they essentially lead in all the categories that are good at this tournament, and primarily tee to green. Tee to green is something we want to be a little bit heavier on than any of the other stats. But you know, if we had to pick a putter, it's going to be Bryson, right? Obviously. So I mean, Bryson is up there. It's one of the top guys, as is Webb Simpson, and so is Harris English. Like, those are hard golfers, and so is Louis. Those are hard golfers, you know, to just simply avoid. Zach Johnson might be a good play at 8,500. It's going to be difficult to create lineups. I think these are really good stats, or really good players, a really good strength of field. But those would be the golfers that I would choose, that I'd be on. So hopefully that helped. Maybe it added a little bit of confusion. If you are confused, please leave a comment asking me a question, or contact me on Twitter or email me. I will do my best to answer in a timely fashion, but for the most part, it's really just comparing, you know, results versus recent form and stats, and just seeing. It's a little bit of checks and balances. It's kind of trying to tell you guys not to stay on one stat over another, but it's also, you know, if there is one stat, to try to lean you towards X amount of golfers. Maybe not all of them within the top 20 stats. I feel like most DFS players will hear from somebody. You want to target tee to green golfers, and right away their first thing is this: all right, who are the best tee to green golfers? Can I make a lineup with these guys? Harold Varner, yep. Sergio, Harold Varner. You probably wouldn't go Sergio. Maybe you would go Colin Morikawa. Who else can I fit? 7,000, 7,200. What does that leave me with? I can do 18,500 left. Well, let's put Russell Henley in, because that'll give us a little bit of, you know, flexibility. Now I have 10-1 left. Okay, well, that doesn't help. I'm I'm going to go ahead and put Tony Finau in and leave myself with $8,300 left. Okay, Joaquin Niemann, there we go, 49,800. Now, I guarantee you this lineup is going to have one miscut. Primarily, every single week I do these StatFit videos, we go and we cover your top tee to green golfers for that week. And we look at the year before and see what top tee to green golfers went into that tournament and what their finishing position was. Again, if I were to do that with this tournament, which was last year, look at our top tee to green guys. You know, sure, you had a value in Joel Damon. That's not bad, but if, say, you went with, I'm trying to find something. If you wanted to make a lineup of all these guys, I don't know if you possibly could. You know, I don't know. Let's see, 34,000. Okay, so I mean, this would have been doable. You could have done something like this, but what was the likelihood? Like, those are your 4 guys in the top 20. Who are you going to pair them up with? We want to find golfers that made the cut. So that's 49,200. 48,900. So you could have went somewhere down this route, but you know what? I'm not going to take it away from you guys. If that's the route you want to go, perfect. But what's the likelihood you get on Matt Jones? What's the likelihood? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. Matt Jones and Joel Damon. You know, what's the likelihood those are golfers that are going to be in your lineup? And are you even going to win any money? You don't even have the winner. So you probably aren't unless it's a cash game. A lot of my analysis comes for GPPs, trying to find the optimal lineup, and you're not going to do it just focusing on one category or another. So that's kind of my long-winded spiel on that. I'm going to leave the video at that. So I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you at the DFS strategy video tomorrow. Okay, bye.